What's up guys, and welcome to another video. In this one here, we're going to be talking all about lateral pelvic tilts or hip shifts, whatever you want to sort of call them here. So we'll be going through how it can happen, how it may present itself. We'll also give you some tests and retests to do, as well as an exercise to try out to hopefully remedy this a little bit for you and get you at least going in the right direction. So lateral pelvic tilt, hip shifts, what is it? Essentially, it's when your hips, either one is higher than the other, or in some other circumstances, you'll actually see that one side is higher and it might even like shift out to the side. So that way, your hips are out of midline and where they should be. In both of these circumstances, in my opinion, and in the way that I typically go after this, I find that it's a lack of some sort of hip internal rotation that is occurring, which is making the body compensate and try to move around that lack of mobility from the femur and the acetabulum where all of that meets. So we'll get the model here and just kind of show you this. So we have the femur itself, and then we have the acetabulum, which is like the socket portion. So they fit in there pretty well. You can have two different types of internal rotation. You can have the femur moving, which we're all pretty familiar with. That'd be like me here, turning my leg in. That's internal rotation of the hip. We can also get a internal rotation in which that pelvis is trying to move over top of the femur. That's where things can get a little hairy for us. So when you have a hip that is maybe a little bit higher, I look at that as an orientation. Same with the shift out to the side. It's your body trying to say, hey, I'm maxed out at the hip internal rotation that I have available. Like I can't get any more, but I don't want you to fail and I don't want you to fall over or not be able to run or whatever the heck it is that you're doing. So don't worry, I got you. I'm just going to move around it. So that's where the hip shift comes in. Your hip moves over top of that lack of internal rotation. It moves out to the side for that internal rotation. Now, where it gets complex is which hip is the one that's truly lacking hip internal rotation. That's where the testing comes in, and that can really get a little bit weird at times. But like I said, hopefully we can send you in the right direction. 9 times out of 10 though, I find that whichever side is hiked up or sort of shifting, that side is probably lacking the hip internal rotation. In some cases, if you have like a big shift or a big hike, you may actually be lacking hip internal rotation on the opposite side. So, we'll do some testing today. Hopefully it helps you. And we'll do the exercise on both sides just to make sure we kind of combat it from all angles, if you will. Okay, let's get into some testing. So testing for a hip height, pretty dang simple, right? You do a posture assessment, get your phone out, take a photo of yourself, take a video, whatever you want to do. If you're watching this, you probably have already done this. You've already been looking at yourself and you're like, hey, something weird is going on. So one way that I like to just have people test this, especially with my online training, so I'll just have them take their fingertips and they will come in here and go on to what is called the ASIS. So it's just this pointy portion of the pelvis at the front of the hips. I'll show you all a little skin here, but it's like right there on me. It's pretty hard to miss, but it's at the very top of that pelvis right in there. You find them, you put your fingertips on there. In my case, when I had some lateral stuff going on, my left hip would like to be a lot higher. Anyways, take that photo. It's right there. If it's lined up, you're probably good. Now, in the other circumstance in which I said, hey, there's not a hike, but it's more of that like shift out to the side. Again, just take a posture photo of yourself. And, if you're shifted out to the side, or you notice that like one hip is into an arm like so, and the other one's just out here hanging out, you may have some sort of shifting, trying to get around that hip internal rotation. So that's a super easy way to just test and retest. So, we do this exercise. I want you to line up again and be like, hey, where's this at? Is this any better? Is it worse? What happened? Another test that we can do is a hip internal rotation test. Okay, so hip internal rotation is a pretty simple thing to measure. You do it either in a chair like so. So you would take your fingertip, even though you can't really see my feet, but you would take your fingertip, put it here at the front of the knee, and then just rotate in as you do it. Now, some things to watch out for as you do this is you rotate out and then you try to like crunch down to make it happen. That's probably the hip height that's occurring on you. But as If you're, being truthful with yourself and really measuring this, put that, finger on the knee, you rotate out, and it's like, all right, I'm about there. Normal, which I'm actually pretty impressed with myself, is about 45 degrees, okay, of hip internal rotation. If you have more, fantastic. Just know if you're cheating. Again, if there's a hip hike, probably cheating. If you're doing this and you're noticing that you're like dropping your leg down, you're probably cheating, okay? So you can test this on both sides. You'd be like, hey, what's my right side look like? Boom, 45. Left side, oh, I'm lacking a little bit. That's pretty normal for me. Again, I had a left hip hike, so lacking that internal rotation on the left side, sort of what was kind of going on here. So hopefully during the exercises, we'll actually see an improvement in this hip internal rotation. And even though I don't have a hip hike, if I have an improvement in the internal rotation, that means I'm less likely to have any weird compensations to move around the lack of mobility on the left side. Okay, so now we have covered how a hip hike or a shift can happen. We have covered testing and what you're going to be doing before and after you do this exercise. So without further ado, I'm down here on the floor in this nice, elegant position. We're gonna use a wall and a towel for this exercise, okay? So we'll be setting up laying on our side. Now, this rule doesn't always apply, but in most cases, you want to probably start doing this exercise on the right side versus doing it on the left side. Now, you're gonna be hitting both sides, one after the other, so it probably doesn't matter too much, but just in my experience, I like to have people lay on their right side, left leg on the wall, and then they'll switch, hit the other side, and vice versa. So I'm gonna get out of my elegant positioning here, and I'm gonna take this towel and place it underneath my hip. Now, where to truly place this is I want this not on the hip bone itself, right? I don't want it here. I want to place this towel closer to like here, like above that hip bone, if you can see that. So it's like up here, the hips can still move pretty freely. What this does is it just locks in the pelvis. So that way you don't go into any weird, lateral tilts, anterior tilts while you're trying to do this exercise, okay? So place this underneath the hip. You're gonna lay down on your side. Again, you'd probably want to start laying on your right side. I'm going to show you on the left side just because that's all the space I got, okay? I get all stretched out here, and I'm going to bring my left leg up to about 90, maybe a little bit lower for some folks. Really just kind of depends. So play around with the height of this. I'm also going to make sure that my right hip or my right foot is in line with the hip. Now, I will put my right heel in line with the TFL muscle, or you could also call this like your hip flexor, your front pocket. I like to have it just in line with that. My left arm is going to be underneath my head, just so that way I have like a pillow. If you want a natural pillow, foam roller, throw it underneath you, have fun with it. Now, I'm going to bring my knee up into this position, and my arm is going to be out in front of me, maybe even a little bit lower. Again, just kind of play around with what is comfortable. Now that I have this sort of weird stride position set up, what I'm trying to do is use a glute to create internal rotation over top of this left side. I have my foot position. I'm going to push through the heel of the foot, maybe a little bit into the arch, just slightly. And I'm going to feel some outside glute kick in, okay? I'm going to hold on to that glute. I'm going to do a slight posterior tilt. So that's, I take the ASIS and I tilt it back. You could also think of it as like your back pockets going to the back of the knees. I tuck my bottom underneath me. Stomach is nice and relaxed. I don't want to be, crunching all this in. This movement comes from this glute, if you would. I maintain that position, and then I'm going to think about my hip rotating down toward the top of my knee, okay? It's like I have a flashlight here, and I want to point it down, or think your zipper line down toward the floor. So I'm feeling this glute firing up. It's doing 90% of the work. I may have a little bit in the TFL or hip flexor, but that should not be doing all this work. If you're feeling TFL in either hip, you're probably in more of this extended anterior tilt, ribs flaring posture, and you're going to try to use these hip flexors to internally rotate the hip. We don't want that. Stacked position. We want the ribs in alignment with the pelvis slightly tucked, not too much to where you're crunching with your abs. You maintain this position, and then we're going to shine our flashlight down toward the floor. So I push my foot in, I rotate down. Notice my whole body doesn't rotate with it. I really just want to let my hips do all the work.
pelvis rotates down, I should feel more glute firing up. Now, stay with me. We rotate down, keep the foot pressed into the wall. I feel all that glute, okay? I'm gonna take this other arm, set it out in front of me, and kind of push my rib cage back just so that way the whole system doesn't, roll over, if you would. So I maintain that slight twist. There it is. Push myself back. And guess what? You're just going to breathe, okay? We're going to fully exhale everything out. Nothing left in the system. I'm going to pause for 5 seconds and then gently inhale through the nose. We'll go again. Exhale. Everything out. And gently inhale. Notice I'm not breathing into my stomach, so I'm not inhaling going like that. I want this to feel more like in my rib cage, feeling that expansion happening everywhere else, okay? So keep the stomach, you exhale everything out, you feel a little bit of tension. It's not six-pack that's activating, it's just like everything working at once, okay? So I'll show you one more time. Again, press into the wall. I get that rotation of the hip. It's not an anterior tilt down, it's just a rotation straight down. Push my rib cage back. Exhale. Pause. Gentle inhale. And there you go. That's the exercise. So now that we've done the exercise, we're going to pop up really quick and check for my hip internal rotation, see if it got any better. So I'm going to pop in this chair real quick. Again, we'll check the right side. So I put my fingertip here on the knee, and then again, I'm not raising up too high. I just rotate. Okay, look, I got a little bit more actually on the right side. Now we'll check the left side, see if it's improved. And it has definitely, I think, improved. I really can't tell from the camera, so hopefully this goes over well. We'll check it one more time, and we rotate. Yeah, definitely an improvement there, okay? If I were to stand up, and again, just check my hips are nice and level, that would be another test that we would have you do, especially if you really have that hip hike going on. So hopefully this will help you out with your hip internal rotation, as well as any hip heights or hip shifts that might be happening. And when we're also lacking hip internal rotation, there is probably some semblance of an anterior tilt that is happening. So I highly, highly suggest checking out this video up here, as it will help you out a ton with your anterior tilts and hip internal rotation issues.